Coming up on Life in the Carolinas, we visit with one of the legendary icons of NASCAR, Jack Roush. We'll learn what he and others are doing to recognize the many heroic people who serve our communities and nation.
A true American hero.
And how North Carolina became the permanent home for a national baseball event. Life in the Carolinas is brought to you in part by the Cleveland Community College Foundation, fostering economic growth through education. Life in the Carolinas is brought to you in HD by Hampton Inn & Suites at Phillips Place. For over 4 decades, Jack Roush has been an icon in racing, from the National Hot Rod Association to NASCAR. Jack's name is synonymous with success and patriotism.
1, 2, 3.
Why do you want Jack Roush to sign your car?
Because he's Mr. Roush.
He's a legend.
He's a legend.
I got a chance to catch up with the legend himself, and he gave me a personal tour of his collection.
Yeah, it's a small museum here in the Concord complex for Roush Fenway. We got a number of things that are reminiscent of sponsors and of some things that happened in my life over a period of time.
You know a little bit about racing. How in the world did that happen?
In high school, I built up out of junkyard pieces my first car. Actually had a wreck, so I was racing against a buddy down a country road.
How old were you then?
I was 16 years old.
Okay. And with that inauspicious start, Jack began his lifelong love affair with cars.
Wow. I went to work for Ford as an applications engineer, and then I met a group of people that were drag racing, and from that we went to sports car racing and, of course, eventually NASCAR.
Is when you were at Ford, is that when you began to develop your appreciation for the Mustangs? And
I worked my way through college, and I graduated from college with enough money to buy myself a brand new car.
okay.
And I bought a Mustang before graduation. Was recruited by Ford, went to work for Ford, and 6 weeks later I was working in the Dearborn assembly plant on quality problems they had with vendor
But you
parts.
already had your
I already had
Mustang.
my car.
Okay.
I worked up a master's degree in mathematics. I wanted to work in research. And Ford made their decision that they had a career path for me in manufacturing. So I said no to that and yes to my drag racing. In 1973, I won the first championship in NHRA, and that meant that I was going to be able to make a career out of that if I wanted to. I did that for another 4 or 5 years, and then we had started the engineering business in Michigan, and I decided to quit racing, and then Ford came back as a supplier and wanted me to build engines for road racers in the early 80s. I knew my engineering business was solid, and that was good, and now I'd have a different basis to launch my racing activities from. If we were able to build our own cars, build our own engines, do all of our own parts and things. And then, of course, when I started NASCAR in 1988, we started with Mark Martin, and a few years later we added Ted Musgrave, and then we added Jeff Burton. But I've got 3 Cup teams and 3 nationwide teams. And I've got a drag race team that my daughter runs, and another drag race team that my granddaughter, 9-year-old, runs.
Right.
She runs a quarter dragster.
9-year-old?
9-year-old quarter dragster. And of course, my son road races in the SCCA World Challenge Series. So we got close enough to 10 race teams.
Well, I'm guessing not everyone knows about, and that's your appreciation of aviation.
I mean, I really wanted to be a pilot, and I wanted to go to pilot training. And as I went through the interview process, they wanted me to ride in the back seat of an F4. They wanted me to be the navigation guy, the ordnance guy. And I said, I want to be the guy up front with his hair on fire. And so because they only offered me initially a chance to be a Wizzo, a rear seat, I made my decision to go to Ford.
Now, you said you had a wreck in this one, so was that when you were just getting started?
No, that was on my 60th birthday. I'd been flying for quite some time. It was a small experimental airplane that was an observation airplane without a closed cockpit. I hit a wire over a reservoir that I was flying over. I was underwater for about 5 minutes. I had a collapsed lung, a broken rib, a femur that was a debris field. My left ankle was turned backwards, and I had a concussion.
Wow, I would say that was injured.
The issue was in doubt for the first night.
Yeah, wow, but you made it.
But I made it.
since you were a child, you've had an appreciation for those who serve our country.
Absolutely. We became aware of the Sellers Foundation's effort to bring the memory of the 9/11 tragedy and all the people who lost their lives there to do something worthwhile for the catastrophically injured sailors and soldiers coming back from our conflicts abroad. And as we became aware of that, it was clear that we could draw some attention to the public at large if we would paint some of our race cars with their schemes spelling for America's bravest heroes.
In being here more than once and having a chance to speak to Mr. Roush more than once, we know what a true patriot he really is. What we have, it's a car, a race car, that's been covered with flecks of World Trade Center steel. To a true patriot, Jack Roush and Roush Fenway Racing, through your efforts, sir, we have been able to deliver numerous homes to some of America's bravest. So thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, John, for having been part of it today.
Thank you, Mr. Roush.
Tell me about the future. I mean, where do you see things going from now?
When I retire, and I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning, when I retire, they'll pick up the mantle and they'll keep it going. As I slow down, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It'll be better.
When we come back, the tragedy we must never forget, and what Jack Roush and others are doing to help those who've served. 9/11 changed the course of American history. But for all the tragedy of that day, there were many heroes. On that day, we saw the worst and the best of human nature. John Hodge is with the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation, creators of the 9/11 Never Forget mobile exhibit. More than most, he has a deeply personal reason for wanting to make sure we never forget.
Stephen Siller was my cousin. Stephen Siller was a firefighter who on September 11th had just gotten off duty. He heard the call on the scanner in his personal pickup truck, turns his pickup truck around, grabs his gear, and he gets out on a highway to get into Manhattan. Total gridlock, cannot get in. He gets out, he straps on that 60 to 65 pounds of gear that he had just picked up. He ultimately ran approximately 3 miles from where he was at on that highway, all the way through that tunnel, and it's almost a 2-mile tunnel, through the streets of Lower Manhattan, where he perished, leaving behind a wife and 5 kids. His family members, his brothers and sisters to start with, said, you know, we don't want his memory to perish at the World Trade Center with what he did, and we think it's symbolic of what all the emergency service workers did that day.
So it's not just his story, but it's a story of everyone involved.
Preserving the memory of what happened that day is only part of the Foundation's mission. They're also dedicated to helping those who have sacrificed so much.
Our premier program is we do Building for America's Bravest. And what does that mean? We know that without 9/11, none of our service members would be in harm's way in Iraq or Afghanistan. So we feel an obligation, a real duty, to take care of those coming back so horribly injured, so catastrophically injured. And by that, I'm talking about primarily triple and quadruple amputees right now. We are building smart homes for each one of these individuals. They're very expensive smart homes, but they're so necessary. If you're missing 3 and 4 of your limbs, it's very tough to lead an independent lifestyle.
So that is the idea, though, to create a home that can give someone the opportunity to be as independent as possible.
These homes, they can be left by themselves for days. They can be by themselves if they want for good.
And they take care of themselves.
They can take care of themselves. Every essential function of that house, even if you're missing all 4 of your limbs, operating off an iPad or an iPhone, will take care of their needs. And some of our guys are living by themselves now. They get to go back to be that proud, free, independent in these homes.
Gunnery Sergeant Thomas McRae is one of those who sacrificed for our country. In Afghanistan, he specialized in explosive ordnance disposal.
If it goes bang or pop, anything from, anything bigger than a machine gun round and all the way up to nuclear ordnance, that's our realm, including IEDs. Okay. We're solely responsible for IEDs. When they find them, when they think they found them, we're the guys that they call.
So that was your niche in service?
Yes.
Okay. And how did this happen?
When I was deployed, and I was working on an IED and clearing around it, and stepped on one that I obviously missed. It instantly lost my legs, and then they had amputated my arm shortly thereafter, and then woke up in the hospital about 3 months later.
In spite of his extensive injuries, Sergeant McCrae remains active, caring for his daughter, and he's even an avid horse rider.
A year to get back onto a horse, but I'll tell you what, the first time I got onto a horse, it was like all my anxiety and my nervousness, it literally went away, and I went, wow, now I remember what it's like to be normal, right there when I got back onto a horse for the first time.
This house is going to be built for you. How's that going to affect you? What do you think? How's that going to change your life?
It's going to, for one, give me my independence for the rest of my life. When I go to take a shower in a house that's not accessible, I risk falling down every time. And that house takes all those worries away. It gives you a completely safe environment for your daily activities.
Among those making this possible is Lionel Toys.
Ricky Stenhouse is number 17. These guys have given the ultimate sacrifice. I mean, in particular, Thomas McCrae, whose name is actually on the back of this car, and that's what we're building for his home here, or we're raising funds.
So when people buy this, when they order this, it actually helps pay for that house?
It does, a portion of the proceeds.
So Ricky's driving a car that's got
Yes.
your name on the back of it?
Yes.
Well, what's that like for you, seeing your name on the back of a race car?
The first time I met Ricky actually was behind his car. We shook hands and he said, hey, there's your name. Check that out. I go, Ricky, that's great. But the more important part is the name underneath it. This is Tunnel to Towers. That's more important than me, is the foundation that supports not just me, but a lot of veterans that have been wounded.
How did this come about for you in creating a special house for one of our heroes?
Well, it started a few years ago. 2011 was the first time that Roush Fenway and Lionel and myself teamed up with the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Stephen Siller risked his life and ultimately took his life going in and saving people out of the towers. But when you have somebody like Tom McCrae, who you're trying to help raise money to build a smart home for, and when he's there, you really want to do good for him and his family, and especially when his daughter wants us to win, and she tells us that before the race. So it takes it to another level.
No action can ever undo the tragic events that have so profoundly affected the lives of so many. But we can all do something to recognize, remember, and support those who have given so much to help us all.
Come on, let's hear it for Tom McCrae, a true American hero.
When we come back, how America's largest veterans organization supports the youth of our country through America's favorite pastime.
First pitch swinging, Danny into right.
The Cleveland Community College Foundation celebrates the continued growth of Cleveland County as it attracts national and global attention, including the American Legion World Series, an American tradition since 1925. Baseball, America's greatest pastime. And here in the Carolinas, our passion for the sport runs deep. In 2012, Shelby, North Carolina became the permanent home for the American Legion World Series. Heard of it? Many of us have, but many haven't. It's just one of the many programs run by the extraordinary organization known as the American Legion.
It's shocking to me every day that I run into people that just don't know who we are or what we do.
Tell me what you do that's so important.
Well, the American Legion was founded in 1919 based on 4 cardinal principles: strong national defense, Americanism, which is patriotism, taking care of our children and youth, and of course taking care of our veterans and their widows and orphans if such the case.
Well, American Legion is a veterans organization started after World War I. When the doughboys came home, there were no benefits whatsoever, no hospitals. So the Legion's been the best advocate for the veterans and some benefits.
We have over 13,000 posts around the country, actually more posts than there are McDonald's and more posts than there are Starbucks in America.
Wow.
A couple little unknown facts. But we're out there in those communities.
Early in its youth, the American Legion learned community service was critical. So they started sponsoring many programs. In 1925, they started the American Legion World Series to give young kids something to do in the summertime.
Were they initially focused on kids that had military dads and moms?
No, none whatsoever. It was strictly open to the public. Any community who wanted to have an American Legion team, had a local American Legion post to sponsor them, could put a team in. Legion baseball started 14 years prior to Little League starting. And the Legion Post also sponsor probably 2,500 soccer clubs, Little League baseball teams, Babe Ruth teams, but there are well over 4,000 American Legion registered teams across the country.
Do those teams play against each other? Are they all trying to get to the World Series?
Ultimately, you want to get down to the final 8 to get into the American Legion Series. We've broken down the country into 8 regions.
The American Legion used to bid out the World Series from city to city to city to city.
And then the American Legion realized in order to grow, we need to come up with a single permanent site.
How does a small area like Shelby, Cleveland County, North Carolina, become the permanent home to such a major national event? Well, the answer starts with a pair of guys named Eddie Holbrook and Jim Horn.
They put out the criteria for, okay, if you are interested in bidding for the World Series, this is what we're going to expect from you. So we got our committee together and started thinking about, well, the only way we can do it is total community buy-in. And when I say total, county, the cities within the county, we visited with the leadership in the county and the cities and said, are you a participant if we do this? And everybody said, yeah, we need to do this. This is something, you know, small town, small community, small county. And North Carolina has a chance to go national. So why not try for it?
Tell me about this guy, Eddie Holbrook, and your experience.
Well, again, Eddie's just a wonderful individual. Very successful businessman, very successful coach. Has coached teams into the NCAA.
Eddie is a guy who can see a big picture, figure the plan, and can draw you in like it's molasses and you're a fly and you're stuck on it and you can't go away. That's Eddie Holbrook.
Whatever Eddie does, he's going to do first class. He certainly does go above and beyond what we'd normally expect.
So over a period of a year, we tried to develop what we felt like would be an attractive package.
And while you're doing this, other parts of the country, they're doing the same thing.
Doing the same thing.
Shelby submitted a proposal, and again, it was outstanding. Instead of submitting a package, it came in with an embossed leather portfolio showing the new logo they were proposing, showing the photographs, videotapes, and everything. Then a inspection committee was set up. They were just so blown away by the excitement that Shelby produced. The city fathers were behind it, the business leaders were behind it, but just even the fans were behind it.
After the inspection trip, it was Shelby's turn to go to the home office of the American Legion in Indianapolis and prove why Shelby should be the permanent home of the World Series.
Okay, here we go now. This is our deal. We've got a chance to really do something. So let's see how many of you want to go to Indianapolis with us to make this presentation. Ended up, we had 2 charter bus loads.
Were you surprised?
I was. I really thought if we get 1 bus load, we'll be fortunate. But we ended up with 2 bus loads and people in their vehicles. We had sort of established orange as a color for the local community for the World Series. So everybody had orange shirts on the Sunday that the presentation was made. Sunday morning, we spent rehearsing with our people. Okay, this is the way we're going to go in, you know. No clacking of heels or anything. We've got to sort of sneak in.
So their backs are to you?
Their backs are to us when we walk into the room. And everybody did such a great job, just almost silence, you know. I never will forget Larry Price, who was the chairman of the baseball committee for American Legion, had his back with the rest of the committee to us, and he stood up, turned around to address, and he said, wow. You know?
And there's a sea of orange, and he's up there going, wow, I can't believe you have this many people here. This is amazing.
So that was more than other people were bringing?
Most other people, a dozen in the room. Yeah. And Shelby shows up with nearly 100 people.
Wow.
Our people did a great job of putting a marketing presentation together with the PowerPoints and the visual aids and everything. We went prepared.
Great presentation by Eddie Holbrook and Jim Horn and the whole community. I was actually allowed to be in there to listen to the presentation, and there's no doubt about it that they would do a great job for the American Legion.
As I told our people, when we got back on the buses. We've done everything we could do. I'm proud of you regardless of what happens. We've made a nice presentation. Got a phone call and from Jim Quinlan and a couple other Legion people said, it's going to Shelby, North Carolina.
Wow.
It was pretty euphoric and it was really startling because I was expecting a phone call Tuesday.
Right.
I wasn't expecting anything 2 hours after the presentation, you know. And so I said, well, we'll stop at the next Cracker Barrel. So we stopped down the road and celebrated a little bit.
What a fantastic job the folks here in Shelby and Cleveland County, North Carolina have done. And not their first attempt at hosting this World Series, but their first as the new permanent host of the World Series as well. And I am already looking forward to coming back here 51 weeks from today.
Shelby, North Carolina is now the permanent home for the American Legion World Series, and everyone's pretty happy.
Sounds like the American Legion World Series has been met with a mighty force of Southern hospitality.
It has. The hospitality is second to none. The people are just wonderful.
We're proud of it. We really are, because it is a showcase not for Shelby, not Cleveland County, but North Carolina.
And they continue to foster the patriotism that's always been part of the Legion's mission.
We really don't show the appreciation we need to show for this country. I've made that a big part of this because I believe deeply in it.
Which has led to a close partnership with the North Carolina National Guard.
Lieutenant Colonel Williams, tell me how in the world the North Carolina National Guard became involved with the World Series in Shelby.
Basically through a phone call from Colonel Roundtree. And he says, hey Maury, I want to talk to you about an idea I got. So we went to Shelby, we discussed American Legion World Series and how the North Carolina National Guard could support that event.
So from a partnership standpoint, it's been good?
It has been great, sir. It's been great. The interaction with the kids, obviously for recruiting is a great thing, but also being there in the community and having the community see us. And some of the things we do, because we set up static displays, we've got everything from tanks to Humvee. They come over and they crawl all over the stuff, and it's just a great time.
So they have that exposure?
They have that exposure.
So the combination of putting on a great show, having an excellent facility, and having a community that's just fully
dedicated. Correct.
It creates an experience that everybody loves.
And plus they got liver mush.
Yeah. Do they ever?
I'll run into people at one of your hangouts, Shelby Cafe, from time to time that says, okay, Eddie, what are you doing different this year and how are you going to improve? Yeah. And so that's our constant goal. What can we do different next year? And how can we improve it next year? Because I'm a firm believer it doesn't stand still. You either keep growing and strive to improve or you go south. And we're not going to go south.
Yeah. So there's a good future.
We hope there is.